Is there no sun in this cursed country? I'm Liam, this is Rob, and welcome to the Guys Podcast. This week, for our 99th episode, How the Hell Did That Happen? We'll be looking back at one of the most beloved movies of the 90s, with Costner at the peak of his powers, Rickman absolutely slaying as the Sheriff of Nottingham, and a soundtrack that was briefly the biggest thing on planet Earth. 1991's Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves was a huge commercial success. It might not have won over all the critics, but if nothing else, it was a massive crowd pleaser, one of those movies that somehow managed to play to every demographic. So yeah, just about, everyone loves Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, but make no mistake, Rob has never been a man to fall foul of the popular consensus. So, sir, what did you make of this gleefully absurd slice of early 90s cinema?
Well, it's absurd, isn't it?
It is absurd.
It is. And to be fair, I mean, I'll reiterate, I've seen this once in my life, and I've watched it again today, and yeah, it is absurd. Well, I will say, I took some slack for only watching it once from Dave, who does the podcast with us, because he told me a story about Robin Hood. He went to the cinema. I can't remember. I think he said he was about 8 or 9. I can't remember the age. Yeah, he went to the cinema, watched Robin Hood, fell in love with it, kept asking his mother for it on video for his birthday, because it was coming out around about his birthday. His mother kept telling him he couldn't afford it. So every time it came on TV, he would cry. The advert came on TV, he would cry. To the point where this is his best memory, by the way.
What, best memory full stop, or best memory about this movie?
I'm not too sure. He just said this best
memory. I mean, I hope this is so far a pretty depressing story. If this is like the greatest memory of his, especially as I know his wife, which makes it doubly depressing.
Yeah. Well, this is his mum, isn't it? His mum, not his wife.
Yeah, but you're saying if this is the greatest memory of his life, I'm suggesting that maybe, getting married or, the birth of his first child might be up there, but whatever.
I might be making his best memory shit up, but anyway.
Oh well, anyway.
You get to his birthday, and he opens up the case, and apparently cue 15 to 20 minutes of nothing but tears. Like, all I could say, I can't believe this dude cried over Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
So he cried when the advert was on TV, and then he cried again once he actually got the video.
He cried when the advert came on TV because he never thought he was going to get it. And then when they finally gave it to him, I think it was tears.
He cried anyway. Yeah. I mean, I assume you don't love this movie as much as 9-year-old Dave did.
No. I mean, to be fair, it's got its issues, haven't it? I mean, going past the whole Kevin Costner not allowed to do an English accent, but yet they let Christian Slater do an English.
Yeah, I've got some issues with. I mean, it's weird because obviously he's the star. Obviously, Kevin Costner, and a lot of the emphasis when people talk about this film, and certainly when people are being critical of this film, a lot of it comes down to the accent. The fact that he's just doing an LA accent, or maybe once or twice he kind of tiptoes into English, which maybe makes it worse because it brings attention to it. Yeah, and that was the whole point. I think was the director said, "Listen, don't do the accent because people will become." Not obsessed with it, but it'll become distracting for people. And they did something similar with was the Tom Cruise movie Valkyrie, where they were all playing Germans. And they just said, "Listen, we're not going to do accents."
No, you do all
because it's just good. Yeah, well, the thing is that suddenly if Tom Cruise is doing a German accent, it's going to become a thing. So they're just like, all right, everyone's just going to be vaguely British as usual. It reminded me a little bit of Richard Attenborough in Jurassic Park, where for the start of the film, he's vaguely does a Scottish accent, and then about 2 minutes in, like the only difference with the Richard Attenborough role, one, he's not in it as much, obviously, but he abandons the Scottish accent so early in the film that you hardly realize it happened. Whereas in this, it kind of keeps creeping back in. Which
it reminded me more of the Three Musketeers from 1993. Where apparently
I've been talking about that film so much this week. A lot of that's to do with the soundtrack and the similarities.
They're meant to be in the heart of France, and they're all fucking just British or American. It's ridiculous.
You can accept It's bizarre, isn't it? Because British has become this kind of catch-all for basically anything old. Anything older than America, and you just do a British accent, and that's it. But here, I think it is. Although bizarrely, I actually find Kevin Costner's accent in this far less distracting than, say, Russell Crowe's in the 2010 version. Yeah. Because Russell Crowe goes all in on the accent. And the thing is, he's actually quite good at the accent. The problem is, he's doing a different one every 5 minutes. He does like a tour of the British Isles. And I'm like, well, he does sound convincingly Liverpudlian, or I don't know, Welsh. But I was like, dude, you're supposed to be from Nottingham for the whole fucking movie. You can't just keep moving around. So for this, I think I just kind of went, well, he's not really doing an accent. It's kind of, it tiptoes at English once or twice, tiptoes towards it, sorry. But for the most part, I'm just like, it's just Kevin Costner. And for my money, he gets away with it on the strength of his star power alone. Yeah. And it's easy to forget now because he's become a bit of a character actor, and now he's kind of having a bit of a, I'm not sure if this would be second, third, or fourth wind because of Yellowstone and how popular that is. But in the late 80s, early 90s, you could make an argument for Kevin Costner being the biggest star in the world. Like, he did like Untouchables and No Way Out in 87. He did Bull Durham in 88, which if you haven't seen is fucking bananas with Susan Sarandon. I don't know if that film's about baseball or about sex or both, but it's strange.
I love how you went sex. I was gonna say I don't know if that film's about baseball or fucking, because it's
basically the same thing. I mean, anyway, we won't go into Bull Durham. That's a whole separate podcast. He did Field of Dreams in 89, Dances with Wolves in 1990, when obviously he won all the Oscars, Prince of Thieves and JFK in 91, The Bodyguard in 92, Wyatt Earp in 94, and then the double header of Waterworld in 95 and The Postman in 97, basically killed him off as a leading man.
Waterworld, directed that. Kevin Reynolds.
Yeah, well, that's maybe one of the reasons why nobody remembers who directed this film. Because this film, I mean, don't get me wrong, Waterworld is bad. It's not as bad as some people make out. And whenever I think of it, I still think of the cable guy. You know, it's like, dry land is not a myth. I've seen it. Kevin Costner, Waterworld. I saw that movie 22 times. It rules. You know, that's what I don't even think of the film. I think of someone else referencing it.
I'm a fan of Waterworld. I thought it was all right.
It's okay is the best I can give it. But in the same way that if you look at this film, and, you know, I don't think anyone ever mentions Kevin Reynolds when they mention this film. I mean, he was the second unit direction on Dances with Wolves. But other than that, like you said, he directed Fandango, which was starring Kevin Costner, hence why he probably got this job. He did The Beast of War. But then even later he did, I'm not sure if you've heard of a film called Rapa Nui, another, Jason Scott Lee's getting another shout out this week, bizarrely. We seem to be on a bit of a Jason Scott Lee run.
What was it called?
He did that, Rapa Nui. It's about like the legend of Easter Island.
Oh, yeah, I thought you said lately. Yeah, back in like 1990 something.
Oh, it was like 94, yeah. And then he ends up doing Waterworld 95. And then I think he did like 187 with Samuel L. Jackson. And The Count of Monte Cristo. And I bizarrely ended up watching Risen with Joseph Fiennes a few years ago. It was just randomly on TV.
But
and I look back,
Kevin Reynolds wrote Red Dawn.
Which needs to be celebrated, obviously, despite the fact, if you listen to the podcast, I have some issues with Red Dawn. But he's one of these guys, all of his films, if you look at how they were reviewed, they've all done pretty well.
Yeah.
Except for the fact that they don't make any money. And yet this film took a bit of a critical battering, but then made all the money. I mean, this film was like the second biggest film of 91. It only fell slightly short of Terminator 2. This was a massive hit. Massive hit.
It did better in the cinema mind than Terminator, only because Terminator was a 15, this was a PG, so it was more accessible.
How do we feel about the fact that it's a PG, by the way? Because there's a lot of discourse on that, and especially it's very odd because you watch this film, and I always thought of it as being like a bit of like a fun family film, which it is. As I said, it plays to every demographic. But the stuff this movie gets away with because of Alan Rickman going full pantomime is unbelievable. If you didn't have Alan Rickman delivering those lines, like, let's be clear, at the end of the film, he is planning on raping his wife-to-be in front of a priest when he's getting married, as the extended version of the film informs us, his mother. But because he's delivering these lines, like he's chewing on the scenery so bad, and Mauritania comes over and provides like a pillow for it to lie on. Really bizarre, but like fundamentally, it's super dark. There's a lot of sexual assault.
I don't think anyone should ever say thank you for bringing up the sexual assault, but right. Someone had to. I had 2 notes written down for that.
Mm-hmm.
My first one: nice to pause during the rape to give your victim a pillow for her head.
Yeah, right? Exactly. And it's, for some odd reason, that takes all the negatives. I don't know, it lightens the scene hugely.
And you want to know pantomime? The way he spread her legs. The way he hopped up, put his legs between hers, and then just outstretched. I'm thinking, oh my God, this is ridiculous. But then you look at it, you're going, this is ridiculous. But he's trying to rape this girl in front of, as you just said, her mother and the priest.
Yeah, well, just to be clear, for those who haven't seen it, in the extended cut of the film, it's basically posited that Mauritana, the witch, is his mother, and basically she replaced the real baby of whatever lineage of Nottingham and replaced it with her baby, kind of thing. So that's obviously not in the
thank you for bringing
cinematic cut, but
because we'll go back to the fact I've only ever seen this film once. How the fuck is there an extended cut of a 2-hour and 22-minute film? And also, the fact there is an extended cut, I was sat there watching this film today going, they've mentioned the sheriff's plan 3 times. What the fuck is his plan?
Well, a lot of that is in the extended cut, supposedly. It's kind of like the obvious comparison for me, and I've brought it up a few times in terms of extended cuts, is Batman versus Superman. Like, if you watch the cinematic cut of Batman versus Superman, I know a lot of people have issues with it, but one of the biggest issues is you don't know what Lex Luthor's doing and why he's doing it.
Yeah.
And the ultimate cut, as it's called, basically spends like 20, 30 minutes just filling in those gaps. Like, all that stuff was cut because it wasn't action or whatever. But it makes the movie so much better. And in the same way, I think a lot of people were aware of the script issues, of the dialogue issues of this movie before it was even released. And when you watch it, of course, a lot of that is pushed to the background by the fact that, as I said, Kevin Costner's just got that mega star kind of charm to him. And Alan Rickman is famously spruced up his own dialogue with Ruby Wax, of all people. And, the fact that he was able to basically...
Pizza, apparently.
Yeah, working in the corner of a pizza with Ruby Wax, working on his dialogue. And obviously you can tell... It's bizarre because the plot then falls into the background, but you just kind of let it happen because you're enjoying the performances so much. But even watching this again, and I know everybody loves Alan Rickman in this film, I don't know how it works. It works, but I don't know how. He is in a completely different movie. He's maybe in a completely different field of entertainment, i.e. pantomime rather than cinema, but it's amazing.
But that's the thing, isn't it? When you get the performances, you're looking at the performances, so you kind of forget about the plot. And you kind of forget about like the action set pieces as well. Like I had written down the final fight between Sheriff and Robin Hood. I nearly forgot his name then. His name's in the title of the film.
Yeah. The Prince, I think he's called the Prince of Thieves.
Yeah. Well, the final fight between them, it's not some choreographed masterpiece. It's basically two guys that can barely hold a sword, right? Just basically chopping wood. I wrote it down. It's like watching 2 monkeys fuck a doorknob. They just, they honestly, they're just swinging for the fences, literally. They don't, and I appreciated that it was just 2 guys. Like back in those times, I'm guessing that these guys knew how to use a sword, but they're not going to do all these magic flips.
Well, it was weird because obviously, and again, we think of it as being this kind of broadly entertaining family film, but the reality is this is 1991, and when most people think of Robin Hood, unless you're kind of including the Sean Connery and Robin and Marion from 1977 with him and Audrey Hepburn, which obviously was a much more kind of grounded version of the story. Most people, when they thought of a big Robin Hood story, Robin Hood in his prime, as it were, they still thought of Errol Flynn and all the kind of classic daring do. This was supposed to be the opposite of that. This was, there's a reason he's not wearing bright green tights. There's a reason that the opening in particular is actually pretty dark. This film opens with a dude getting his hand chopped off in Jerusalem or wherever it is.
I said mind, but I kind of think that's probably the case for most of the world. But I think when we think of Robin Hood in Britain, we probably think of Robin of Sherwood from 1980.
Oh, the BBC one.
The BBC TV show.
Yeah, that's which this took loads from, in fairness.
Yeah, well, it took the idea of the Moor from this.
Yeah, Akeem. Yeah, they had to change the name and something because they didn't even realize when they were making the film that he wasn't a character in Robin Hood lore. He was made up for the BBC version.
Why was he confused, Morgan Freeman's character, Akeem? Because he kept calling Robin Hood Christian. Like, what? He knew his name. Why is he calling him Christian?
Come on, dude. I'm not falling for that.
I had to go for the low-hanging fruit, dude.
You did. Well, but he does call him something else a few times, and I couldn't quite make it out.
I got it in facts. It's
okay.
Not Sahid. It's
we'll wait for facts then. We won't get caught up with them. We'll wait for you to get to that in facts. But I mean, that's one of the biggest draws of this film. I mentioned the fact that obviously, some people had issues with his accent. I was just kind of wowed by his, star appeal kind of thing. The fact is, he, especially in the early 90s, Kevin Costner was one of the most likable screen presences in the world. The only issue is that he was one of the most American screen presences. There's a reason nearly all of his other films are about Americana or baseball or both,
That's the thing, see, I don't think he was as big as you're making out, for me personally.
Dude, he was massive.
But no, as I'm older now, I know about all his 80s, 90s films. Again, I've never seen The Bodyguard. It never interested me. But all the other ones I've seen, Bull Durham, I've seen them all now. But then Kevin Costner came into my purview probably through Waterworld.
Yeah, but I guess that's kind of what you're into at a certain age kind of thing. I guess like The Untouchables in 88 we might have been a bit young for it when it was released then. He was, let's be clear, when we were watching movies, when we thought of a movie star in the late 80s, early 90s, we were still thinking Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Jean-Claude Van Damme, shit like that kind of thing. But in terms of like getting a grown-up, quote-unquote, grown-up movie made, this was your guy. Like, he was like an old-fashioned movie star in many respects, and he was the guy, you could just put his name on a poster and just build that. That was, if you want an idea of how big a star he was in the early 90s, he got Waterworld and The Postman made. Dude, those are just the height of vanity projects, where he's like, I can get whatever I want, and I'm going to make this ridiculous film about Waterworld. It bombs, spectacular, although supposedly it's since made money in the long run. It's not as big a bomb as some people make. But the fact that he was able to make that, it bombed, and then it was like, I'm going to make The Postman anyway, and they gave him even more money. That's what finally killed him.
If you want to reach episode 100 of this podcast, stop putting Waterworld and Postman in the same fucking sentence. Right? Because Waterworld is all right. Waterworld I like. Postman is fucking awful.
Yeah, but I mean more from a kind of a narrative to his career. The fact that those two were the ones that really killed him as a leading man. But if you really want to know how famous he was, he had a butt double in this film. You only get a butt double if you're super famous. That scene down by the water, that's not Kevin Costner. Supposedly, if they wanted his butt, it was going to cost them extra money. The only thing disappointing about that sequence is they got a guy with like the worst tan line of all time. What the fuck?
Let's talk about doubles. I sent you a picture whilst I was watching this. Why did Christian Slater need a double to push the catapult at the end of the film?
Is it a catapult or is it a trebuchet? I've got that written down. I never know the difference.
It's a catapult. It's not a trebuchet. A trebuchet.
Trebuchet's the bigger one, isn't it?
It has the big. It has the counterweight.
Yes, that's it. I always get those two mixed up. But no, it's insane. And I mean, that brings us to another issue. Like, I will go out in defense of Kevin Costner all fucking day and night in this film. I will not do the same and I love Christian Slater.
I'm a fan of Christian Slater, but I forgot. I didn't forget he was in this film. That's wrong, because that's the only thing I remember from that film. I completely forgot why as well that he's his fucking brother. Oh my god!
Yeah, I mean,
why? Why do you need that shit?
That's the last of my issues with it. It's just the fact that he's in it, and people give like Kevin Costner shit for his accent. Christian Slater's accent's terrible in this film. The thing is, removing the accent, I buy Kevin Costner as Robin Hood. I buy him as the leader of men, and I buy him, more importantly, in this world that's being created for the screen. I do not buy Christian Slater's existence in this movie. Every time I see him, I just see I never see Will Scarlet. I just see Christian. And you've got to remember, this was a big time in his career. He just done Heathers, Gleaming the Cube, that's what we're doing on the podcast. Yeah. The Wizard, Young Guns 2, Pump Up the Volume. It was like just before Cuffs and Star Trek 6 and True Romance. Even like Interview with the Vampire. But he doesn't have that movie star appeal in this film. He's just a dude in this film who doesn't look like he belongs.
You want to know my problem with putting Christian Slater in this? Is that they put Christian Slater in the Band of Merry Men. When you see the rest of them appear out of the woods and they're holding Hakeem and Duncan. Poor fucking Duncan. That dude never had a chance.
Oh, I hate Duncan.
When they're holding, get to him in a minute. Is it Hakeem or Akeem?
Akeem.
H or A?
A.
So when they're holding Hakeem and Duncan hostage, all these guys have no teeth. They're all just horrible.
No, wait. Is it Hakeem or is it Azim? I think it might be Azim.
Am I confused?
You may have convinced me.
From Men in Tights.
No, you carry on, and I'll find out if it's Azim, because you may have confused me. Azim, yeah. A-Z, yeah, I thought it was.
No. Am I confusing him from Men in Tights? No, that was that.
You might be, yeah, you might
that
be.
was that shoe. But all these guys, even Little John, and the way he goes, I'll just call you John, Little John, is fucking awful. But all these guys come out of the woods, and you could tell they're all peasant farmers. They did good.
They look the part.
They gave them, they made them look. And then all of a sudden, you get this dude come out who's got a ray of light on him. Like he's got a wind machine blowing, and it's
magnificent hair. Yeah. He's got full on Kevin Costner's hair is a big question mark over this entire movie. Christian Slater's hair, again, it's magnificent, but it has no place in this film. And exactly what you said. It's not just it looks so out of place. He's often standing next to a whole cast of characters who look totally in place. They look time-specific. Yeah. Their teeth look fucked. Their skin looks fucked. They look fucked. They look like they come from, I don't know, 12th century England and they live in the fucking forest, whereas he's just walked off a fucking Hollywood lot. It's ridiculous. And I don't know why Kevin Costner doesn't look as ridiculous standing next to them. Maybe because he's supposed to be, from a royal lineage.
He's meant to be.
Yeah. But yeah, Christian Slater, man. The only person who knows me more is the aforementioned Duncan. Man, I know he's just an old dude, and I don't want another situation where I'm suggesting Charlton Heston gets a credit instead of him. But every line he delivers makes my toes curl. I just don't. Point me towards danger. I'm not afraid. Oh, God, Duncan, I could fucking kill you. It's like when he died, I was like, about time. I'm just not convinced he was required at all.
Do you know when they finally, it was 4 months, wasn't it? The travel from, it wasn't Jerusalem, was it?
So they were over fighting the Holy War or whatever it was in Jerusalem. The Crusades in Jerusalem, but I'm not sure if he was in Jerusalem or if he was in modern day Turkey, I guess it would be.
Yeah, I'm not so sure, but it took him 4 months. All I can think of, when he jumped off the boat and he started making out with the sand, I could think of, you wouldn't do that on Barry Beach, would you? You'd end up with a hypodermic needle in your mouth.
You certainly would. I mean, there's a lot of issues there as well. I mean, don't get me wrong, this film looks the part. I have quite a love-hate relationship with the lighting in this film, for instance, because when he has that walk from Dover to Nottingham via Hadrian's Wall in Scotland, gets there in a night, despite the fact that it is legitimately a 600-mile trip, but whatever, we'll allow that. When they're walking around, I love the naturalistic lighting that they use quite often because it doesn't look like a movie set. What it really looks like is they're actually walking in England, and they don't seem to fight against the fact that it's overcast either. Quite often it just looks a bit drab in that way that the UK always just looks a bit drab.
Yeah.
But when they go the other way, and they, like you said, they have the rail lighting for Christian Slater. I think it's the moment when they have the battle in Sherwood Forest. And they think Robin Hood's dead because he falls down off the Ewok village set, falls down into the bushes. But when he reappears in front of everyone, he's backlit, but from below. I'm like, where is this source of light coming from? The same thing happens with Brian Blessed when he goes out and fights the Sheriff of Nottingham's men. He's backlit from behind. Where's the source of light? And the weirdest one. What's that, sorry?
What's with that? I appreciate
what, the lighting or just Brian Blessed?
No, not Brian Blessed. That whole section where Brian Blessed goes out to rescue the farmer's family and it's a trap. Mm-hmm. And you've got all these guys in white coats. Oh, sorry, not white coats. Basically in Ku Klux Klan wear.
Yeah.
You got the sheriff in his weird gimp mask. Takes his mask off. Oh, it's you. Okay, that's fine. He's dead. That's never mentioned again, that they're in this weird fucking cult thing. What's going on?
Yeah, I think, again, I've not seen the extended cut, but I think this whole idea of them being some kind of devil cult is dealt with to a certain extent in the extended version. And but again, explaining for instance, why he has a witch with him. We just accept the fact that he lives with a witch. All she does really is give out really common sense suggestions. She throws a stone. She gets blood out of an egg, and she goes, you should probably, marry someone of noble blood. It's like, well, yeah, that seems really fucking obvious. You already clearly want to fucking shag Marion. Yeah. And then she has to suggest that. I said, come on, dude. I'm not convinced she's, Mortiana, is that her name? Mortiana?
Mortiana, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not convinced she's required in the cinematic cut of this movie at all. I don't mind her in it, but is she essential to the narrative at all? I don't think so.
She needs to change where she's shopping, mine, because her eggs have blood in them.
Yeah, that is a big question mark. But and again, like, this whole thing is like, is the magic real or is she just a psycho? Is he out of his fucking mind? It's never. And again, it comes down to the fact that the plotting in this film is just really, especially. I see the plotting. The plotting on the Robin Hood side is actually okay.
Yeah,
you get from A to B, B to C, and it's all fine. It's all on the sheriff's side where you're like, what is his intentions? What are his plans? What's up with the fucking witch? It's just never explained.
I love how you just said, apparently she's his mother.
Mm-hmm.
And he keeps her in the basement.
Well, she is a witch. That's where witches live, right? I guess. I don't know.
Do they? I thought...
Well, the thing is as well, he can't let everybody know that the witch is his mother. So he's got to keep her in the basement because, she's his witch and that's where witches go. I guess. Again, never explained. But it was a good point that you made at the start, because when I was rewatching it, before I did the research about the extended cut, I was like, wait, why are they in white robes? Why does he have a mask? What the fuck's going on here? Because like you said, his men are never in robes. There's never any suggestion of a cult later on. It just happens and then goes the fuck away.
I love Rickman's spoon line. We're going to cut your hat off with a spoon. Apparently that was ad-libbed. So much so that they decided to address it a bit later on in the film with Michael Wincott, who I absolutely love Michael Wincott. I think he's great.
I hate him, but I think you're supposed to hate him. I think that's the gist. I hate him in everything because he's always an asshole. But he's a really good asshole.
His voice. Even he played the weird red lobster thing in Treasure Planet. And it's just, his voice is fantastic. But I love it. He's there, he's eating an apple or something, and you can see him pondering. And he just goes, why a spoon, cousin? And it's just, it's so...
Yeah, why not an axe? Because it's dull, you twit. It'll hurt more. Yeah, it's just great that we've got to bring this up again.
When the sheriff stabs him, and he goes, at least I didn't use a spoon. From one ad-lib line, you got 3 fucking pieces of gold out of that. I thought that was great. I thought that was really good.
Well, that's the thing. Most of the most memorable... I know I quoted Morgan Freeman at the start, but I've always loved that line as someone from Britain. Yeah. But like that whole thing where he's like, no more merciful beheadings and call off Christmas. Everyone remembers the call off Christmas line, but... what's a non-merciful beheading? I don't know what the difference is. I was like, do it with like, again, is this spoon related? We don't know.
The 2 women as well, when he goes, you, my quarters, 10:30, you, 10:45, bring a friend. And I'm just thinking, dude, 15 minutes? I mean, I'm not trying to claim I'm some Lothario, but are you going to have enough time in 15 minutes to finish one off and bring another one?
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that he probably didn't spend much time with foreplay. Yeah. He doesn't seem like that kind of guy. But I mean, it's not so much getting it done in 15 minutes, I don't think. The big issue is like being ready to rock again, I suppose, isn't it? It's like, you know, if I had sex at 10 or 10:30, and even if I was done by 10:45, if another woman came knocking on the door, maybe this is my age, I don't know, for more sex, I would have to be like, listen, you're going to have to give me at least another 30 minutes to have any chance of this being successful.
You know what he's doing, don't you? He's going back down to see his mother to get a period egg omelette, you know, to give him a little bit of vitality.
That probably makes sense. Yeah. That probably makes sense. If she is a real witch, I'm sure she has some tricks up her sleeve beyond just, I don't know, common sense. That seems to be a major superpower. I don't know, very strange. Although I got to mention one thing, because it just that scene is just after he finds out Marion was, you know, she was planning on telling King Richard and stuff like that.
Yeah. She
randomly gets scared by a cat. Now, it sounded like she said, oh, Shakademus. Like the cat's name was Shakademus, as in, you know, 90s pop group Shakademus and Pliers. I was like, it can't be Shakademus, can it? It can't be. Sorry, a bit of a random one, but it just reminded me of Shakademus.
I mean, mate, you're talking to the king of random, apparently, so don't worry about that. But
okay, fair enough.
I miss Shakademus.
But yeah, I was like, to bring it back to like the core cast, one of the underrated elements of this film, I actually think, is the double act of Costner and Freeman. And I know this film got slaughtered everywhere, but it was up for a whole... MTV bizarrely loved it. It was up for Best Movie, Best Male Performance, Best Female Performance, Most Desirable Male, because that was a thing back in the early 90s, Best On-Screen Duo, Best Villain, and Best Song from a Movie, unsurprisingly. But the one that stood out is really that chemistry between Costner and Freeman, because you spend so much of the time, not just with Robin, but with Robin and Azim.
Azim, yeah.
And they're both fans. I mean, Morgan Freeman... Again, the kind of opposite end of the spectrum from... Everyone remembers Rickman because he's so big, he's so pants man. You know, Morgan Freeman isn't that big in this film, but his his relationship with Robin really is the heart and soul of the film. I know it's he and Marion as well, and I'll go on the record to say another reason why I think this movie works, despite the issues with the plot, the narrative, and some of the dialogue, is that their chemistry is fantastic as well. Costner and Mary Elizabeth, I'm getting the name wrong, Mastrantonio, is that right? Yeah. I actually think, they don't actually get a huge amount of screen time together, but when they are, I totally buy into the fact that they're in love with each other. And I totally buy into the idea that after the film finishes, Robin and Azim are going to be like best friends forever, basically.
Yeah, I do think so. I think Morgan Freeman is fantastic in whatever he does, to be fair. I can't think of a bad Morgan Freeman delivery. But he is so good, like you said. And I love the things he does in this, like where Kevin Costner's Robin Hood's like, oh, you should have helped me. Yeah, I don't answer on your time. I'll decide when I'm a little worried because the wise words of Azim are very much being embraced by my wife. So get up, move faster. Yeah, she's taken to that pretty well. And you whine like a mule. You are still alive. I'm like, oh, fantastic. I look forward to hearing those all the time now. Could you be talking about your love life on this podcast?
I might be. I've already criticised. Anyway, forget about it. Speaking of the casting, as great as it is, there are some like pretty interesting alternative casting for this film because they actually wanted Carrie Elwes and I'm never sure if that's the right way to pronounce the second name, and Robin Wright. Both of them lifted directly from Princess Bride, which I get because Princess Bride is one of the greatest fantasy movies ever made. I think it might have been a little bit distracting if they both just got the roles of Robin Hood and Marion in this film. But obviously Carrie Elwes did get the role anyway because he turned it down because he thought the script was terrible and then ended up doing the parody of it 3 years later.
Well, I love Men in Tights.
Right, just be clear, you've seen this film once. How many times have you seen Men in Tights?
Double digits, I think.
Of course you have. You're as mental as fucking Dave crying when he got the VHS. Absolute madness.
Men in Tights. Yay! Sorry.
and the other big one was Johnny Depp as Will Scarlet. Again, very American. With Johnny Depp, too pretty, I think.
Yeah.
Surely too pretty. But I know he's supposed to be his brother, so again, he is from a royal lineage. But again, it's just going to be as distracting having Johnny Depp standing next to all those very, very poor-looking Englishmen.
You missed one, mind, because apparently it was offered. He said on a UK breakfast TV show back in the 90s, it was offered to Mel Gibson. But
which role?
Robin Hood.
Oh, Robin Hood.
Well, Robin Hood was offered to Mel Gibson, but he turned it down because he'd only recently done a
Hamlet.
Yeah, he'd only recently done a period piece, Hamlet.
Was it Hamlet or Macbeth?
No, Hamlet.
Hamlet, yeah, it was Hamlet. Sorry.
Me and Dave called you.
Yeah. No, you didn't call me out. We called Dave out.
Was it Dave?
Dave literally said, because I was making the argument that I thought, we were making the argument, that Mel Gibson was a fantastic actor. And he have all the examples, like, he's okay, but, you can't imagine him, I don't know, doing Hamlet. And we're like, is this a joke? I was like, dude, he literally played Hamlet on the screen.
Yeah, in 1990.
Yeah. We are fucking slaughtering Dave today. But yeah, I could totally have seen Mel Gibson in the role of Robin Hood. He's got that same kind of, he's got that movie star pizzazz, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
The accent probably still would have been pretty ropey, but there's no reason Mel Gibson couldn't have done the role. He feels like he falls into a similar-ish category as Kevin Costner, slightly different careers, but they've both got a similar vibe in an odd way, I think. They both, like you said, that kind of almost old-fashioned movie star quality, I think they've both got.
This film did, or a lot of film, and I always question it, is the traversal of time. Apparently there's a week gone by in the sheriff's time, but that's enough for them to build, as you just said, Ewok Village, for them to rob millions. I'm pretty sure that's
they're
what it said.
I mean, the room is ridiculous, and he does say millions. I'm like, wait, millions of what?
Yeah, I had
pound
millions. He's taken millions from you.
Yeah, he says millions, which seems ludicrous.
It seems a lot for that.
It seems a little bit Austin Powers. I need 1 billion trillion zillion dollars. It's just God. Like, dude, this isn't happening in the 12th century.
You said Austin Powers. It reminds. Christian Slater did that terrible accent in Austin Powers as well, didn't he? About
I love him in that.
Sherbet.
I'm going to go get you some orange sherbet.
Yeah. So,
Here, have a stick of gum. Don't mind if I do.
He's keeping that terrible accent.
We should totally do Austin Powers, by the way. We should absolutely do Austin. I love that film. People forget because it got parodied so much, like a parody of a parody, and everyone did the "Oh, behave" and all that nonsense.
Yeah.
Everyone forgets how absolutely genius the first film is in particular. I won't go into it. We'll have to do it as a podcast. But yeah, it's really good.
What did you think of Robin Hood's mullet?
I didn't have any issue with it. I mean, to me at least, it felt era appropriate in a way that Christian Slater's hair didn't. Like, you've got to remember, his hair is often next to Nick Brimble as Little John and Daniel Peacock as David of Doncaster. They have the most absurd hair, especially Little John. He has just, I don't know what you'd even call it, a coat of hair. It's bizarre. I don't even know what the style would be.
That dude is the hairiest ever. You can imagine him taking his jumper off, and he's just got, like, he just looks like a bear, I would imagine.
Yeah, but the thing is, hair, it doesn't have a style. It's just hair, and a lot of it. You know, like, the modern equivalent of it, the shorter version, is something like, I know you're not a football guy, but Mikel Arteta, the Arsenal manager. He has that kind of Lego hair where it's just hair. Yeah. It just exists. Whereas his is that, but 20 times longer. It doesn't seem to go down. It just exists. And the mullet sitting next to it, it doesn't look weird in a way that, say, again, Christian Slater's does, because it's just too coiffed.
To the point, Little John's hair got wet. And it didn't change.
It didn't, because there's no room for it to change.
Yeah,
there's no air in that hair. That sounds like a saying. There's no air in that hair.
There were scenes where Kevin Costner, again, there's somebody with a wind machine, would just like, you got that slow walk of him walking behind people, going, "God bless Robin Hood," and his hair is just. I
love it. I mean, we'll get to it in favorite scene in a minute, but the poster sequence. I think it was like famously shot at 300 frames per second and then slowed down. So it was in slow motion, but it retained its crystal clear quality. Yeah. And it's ridiculous because the one moment I think they introduced the black powder, I don't know what that accent was, but as Azim said, just to have that one explosion so that when he shot that arrow, the flaming arrow, there was just fire all behind him. Everything's on fire at that point. Like, his hair's on fire, the arrow's on fire, the walls are on fire, everyone's on fire. But it just, talk about like that movie star moments when it slows down and he's got the flaming arrow and there's just fire behind him. And it's ridiculous, but I'm like, I just buy into it because it's Kevin Costner. And we've talked about it in other films. Like, Kevin Costner, he doesn't have the right actor. I don't want to put him in quite the same category because I do think he is a good actor. But what he has is that movie star appeal in the same way we talked about Arnold Schwarzenegger in the past. Schwarzenegger isn't the best actor, but you put him on screen and he just shines. The most obvious, I guess, comparison would be, say, Russell Crowe versus Orlando Bloom. You know, when I'm thinking of kind of period pieces, as soon as you saw Costner on screen in Gladiator, obviously it helped that he's also fantastic in that film, but you just bought him on screen as being part of that world. As soon as you saw Orlando Bloom in, what was it called?
Kingdom of Heaven?
Oh, the other Ridley Scott one. I didn't buy him on screen. I didn't buy him in the world. I didn't buy him as the leader of fucking men. And just some people have that kind of screen presence.
Gladiator,
and Costner has it.
Gladiator is fucking awful.
Oh, dude, don't be silly. Don't be silly.
It's fucking terrible.
It's not terrible at all. It's not terrible at all.
It is dog shit. And the fact they're bringing a fucking sequel to that film.
I have an issue with the sequel, but
let's go back to the...
Right, let's go back to this film. That is a whole...
We need to go back to the flaming arrow.
Oh, dear God. That has derailed me personally. Okay, so the flaming arrow, yes.
With the flaming arrow. Nobody deserved it more than that executioner to get a...
Oh, he's the worst. I know executioners generally bad by default. He's the worst executioner on screen ever.
But yeah, the fact when he's leering over Christian Slater and he goes, "There's always room for one more," and he just spits in his face.
Oh, it's gross. And he's got the teeth, the look. Yeah. He looks like he's really enjoying his work. Don't get me wrong. In that moment, Will Scarlet deserves to be where he is because they've got that whole plan. And for some reason, he goes up to Wolf, or whatever his name is, the kid, and gets right up in his grill. I'm like, why? You want to get caught. It's insane. So when he ends up there, I'm like, you deserve to be here. But then when the guy spits in his face, I'm like, okay, that's maybe a bit much.
Wolf's a bit of a prick as well, isn't he? But my God, he's got a tough neck.
He does have he takes that drop really well.
Yeah.
Really well.
He takes that drop really well, and he's hanging for fucking ages.
But that's an interesting one, though, because he also has magnificent hair. He's obviously a handsome young man, but he doesn't look as out of place. I'm not sure if they just added more mud to his face.
That's what I'm thinking.
Because let's be clear, his parents are Little John and Fanny. Like, I don't know how they make that kid. It doesn't make any sense. But I never questioned
when you've had 8 kids. You know, you're gonna go to the bottom of the gene pool or to the top of it, aren't you? Like throughout your lineage, there might have been a handsome man that's coming through because
you think it's just by odds. It's like, you know, eventually you get a tall I was going to say Chinaman, I'm not sure, Chinese man, Chinese person, because there's just so many of them. It's like she's had, I think they mentioned that was her 8th child. Yeah. So we're going to go on the assumption she's got 7 rotters and then Wolf, and Wolf's the only one we see in the film anyway, really, isn't she? Isn't he? Sorry.
Do you know Fanny's name in real life?
No.
Her name is Sue Drowett. Now, the reason I bring that up is because how would you spell Sue?
S-U-E?
Not S-O-O?
Sue? No, that's a very hippie new. I don't know, because I assume she would have been born in 1950 something. So I don't know where Sue with S-O-O came from.
Yeah, Sue Drowett. Or
Sue.
Sue?
I have no idea. Absolutely bonkers. But yeah, I don't know. It's I don't know where that's. I'm still thinking about Gladiator. I think ridiculous. But yeah, I don't know why he fits into the world in a way Christian Slater doesn't. But it is amazing because I mentioned briefly about their hair that you have Nick Brimble as Little John and Daniel Peacock as David of Doncaster. I think they're the most kind of prevalent of the quote unquote merry men, despite the fact they're not all that merry.
I think Friar Tuck was more prevalent. When he finally came into it, I think he.
Well, that's the thing. I actually, when I was thinking of Friar Tuck, or when I was remembering Friar Tuck, I always thought of him as being just part of the gang from the start. He's actually introduced very late into the film. Once he's there, he becomes quite an important part of the group. But he's not a part of it until an hour and a half into this film. But what I will say for Michael McShane as Friar Tuck is he might be the best on-screen drunk of all time. Like, he's the guy you want to go to the pub with. He's totally obdurate. He's a pain in the ass, but he's very up and down with his mood. But he always looks like a fun time, surely. And he's so convincing as a drunk.
I'd love to know the percentage of the ale that dude is drinking. Because, like I said, he is loving life. He is just constantly on it. He doesn't care who he's drinking with. He's just going to keep drinking.
Well, yeah, it's one of those things. It's like nowadays, of course, it would be depressing because you're like, oh, he has an alcohol problem. But back then, you're like, oh, he's just a good time. It was like I said, a dude I knew when I was younger. He was always this guy. He just drunk all the time, and it was fun because it was like, oh, he was just always pissed, and you'd see him over the park, like first thing in the morning. He'd be walking his dogs, and he'd have like a 6-pack of like Stella or Strongbow. And when you're like 15, 16, you're like, what a character, this guy. And he'd fall asleep in the pub at like midday, and he'd put things on his head, and it was all fun and games. And then suddenly you run into him when you're like in your mid-20s, and you're like, oh no, this is quite sad, isn't it? It's quite depressing. Like, I don't know when the line is, but there is a point when alcoholism stops being fun and starts becoming a problem. But luckily in this film, it's still in the fun stage, so we'll stick with that.
Yeah. I mean, I got nothing to say about you taking a guy drinking at 6 a.m. or whatever it was fun.
It is, dude, if you're like 15, 16, and you see one of your mates like caning a beer while he's walking the dog in the morning, you're like, oh, what a fucking legend. What a legend.
Is he 15, 16 as well?
No, he's not. But I'm just saying, like, you know, well, when you just meet someone, for instance, if they like a drink and stuff like that, it can be quite fun. But if suddenly it's like the 7th time you've met them and every time they've been pissed, you're like, oh dear, do we have to, have an intervention or something? Anyway, we're talking about alcoholism now. We should probably wrap this up. Do you want to go to favorite scene?
Yeah, you go first. I mean, you've already mentioned it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned the fact that it is the poster shot of the film, but Costner shooting the fire arrow with the explosions, the fire to save Will Scarlet. It is absurd. It's brilliant. I think it literally sums up the greatest moments of this film. I know there's a lot of scenes with Alan Rickman which are fun, but I think of those as more as like independent dialogue moments, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But as a scene, and it really is, like you mentioned earlier, and we probably didn't dig into it, the fact that because they're going for a slightly more grounded universe here, you don't get the Errol Flynn daring do. When they do have the sword fight, like Alan Rickman's sword in particular just seems too big. It seems too heavy for him. Yeah. And so they're kind of swinging it round. It's almost a little bit clumsy. And the action sequences...
Like I said, monkey trying to fuck a doorknob.
Exactly. And we've become kind of like accustomed to everybody knowing parkour. Like, and we'll get to the 2018 version, which is shit. But of course, everybody is borderline a superhero. Nobody's a superhero in this film. Even Robin Hood, like you said, when he fights, he almost gets beat by the sheriff. It's only because Marion kind of intervenes. But they fight almost like human beings. It's in that moment when it truly goes full Hollywood with the flaming arrow. And I'd say it's arguably at its best in that moment. But I just love that scene.
Oh, it is a great scene. I mean, it's not my favorite scene. I mean, my favorite scene is going to have to be the only thing I remembered from this film from my first...
Oh, no, not that stupid song.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Because that's the only thing I remembered from the original. The original, my original watching.
Yeah. And so that's the sequence when he's just about to fight Little John or John Little for the first time in the stream, yeah? Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, he sings a song, it's great. And then you think, all right, Christy Slater, you can shut up now. Beg for mercy, rich man. Okay.
Do you still know the song off the top of your head?
Yeah.
Go on then.
Sing it again.
100%.
There was a rich man from Nottingham who tried to cross a river. Oh, what a dope. Slipped on a rope. Now look at him shiver.
So you saw this film like once 30 years ago and you still remember that song?
Yeah, I don't know why.
Unbelievable. Well, I think my scene was much better. As for the loves...
Well, I mean, it's no accounting for taste, is it? I mean, gladly.
Well, imagine they had that on the front cover of, like, the poster. Just, like, Will Scarlet in mid-song. I just don't think it's going to work.
Or Robin Hood lying on his back, just in water.
Just in water. Like, what kind of film is this? Jesus Christ. In terms of loves, I suspect a lot of these will be quite similar. Alan Rickman, top-tier bad guy. I think everyone would remember him for this if it wasn't for the fact that he was also Hans Gruber. It's almost like, kind of... All I can think of as a comparison is like Stallone being remembered for Rocky, despite the fact that he was also Rambo. It's that level of bad guy, I think. Morgan Freeman as Azim, as I said, the other end of the spectrum in terms of performance in many respects, but he also gets his fair share of fantastic lines. And I think his camaraderie, or whatever you want to call it, his, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think. What's the word I'm looking for?
His what with who? What are you on about?
His relationship with Robin Hood, his on-screen chemistry. Jesus Christ, I said it like 8 times earlier. I just couldn't think of it. But yeah, I think his chemistry with Robin Hood is actually one of the more important aspects of this film. And yeah, honestly, despite like the laid-back attitude and slightly iffy accent, I actually love Costner, which won't come as a surprise now, as I've been banging on about him for the last hour and a half. But I do legitimately think he's an essential part of this film. I think he's really good.
Well, he has to be an essential part of this film. He's playing Robin Hood. But
no, it's not just... I don't like... A lot of people would pick him out as being like a negative of this film. And I think you could pick negative parts of it. But I think this film works, at least partially, because of Kevin Costner.
Yeah, I wouldn't class him as a full negative, but he's not in my loves, to be fair.
Well, the thing is, right, what happens if he was swinging for the fences as well? What happens if, like, you can only have one Alan Rickman in this film. You can only just about get him in this film because he's going for it. I appreciate that.
You need the straight guy. You need the guy swinging for the fences, and there was always going to be Alan Rickman. But he's just a little bit lackluster in this.
I just think if he plays it a little bit too straight as Robin Hood, they just don't feel like they belong in the same film or on screen together.
He is playing it straight. He is the straight man.
Yeah, but there's, again, because of the accent, because of the mullet, because of the fact it's Kevin Costner, it feels bigger than it is, the role. And a lot of the dialogue is, again, arguably a little bit trite, a little bit straightforward.
Not so much dialogue. I don't agree. I honestly think you could put any other actor in Kevin Costner's role and still be the same film. Like,
no, I haven't that.
Yeah,
it's not as important. I'll admit it's not as important as Alan Rickman. You just need Alan Rickman. There's no replacing Alan Rickman in that role. I mentioned it earlier. You could theoretically have Mel Gibson in this film, and it would still be good. But I don't think you can just plop anyone into it. I don't think that's.
I think you do. I honestly don't think Kevin Costner is the be all and end all of this. He's not in my loves, but he's not in my hates either.
Fair enough.
He's Marmite. He's meh. Yeah,
I would have him well ahead of Marmite. Put it that way. He's much close to strawberry jam for me, if that makes sense.
Take him on.
That should be the poster quote. Kevin Costner, the strawberry jam of the movie.
I could pretty much leave him at this point. It's just But for my loves, Alan Rickman, obviously, the guy is loving life because they basically gave him carte blanche to do whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
Morgan Freeman.
Yeah.
And randomly, I'm going to stick to people in this film. Michael McShane as Friar Tuck. That dude is fucking loving what he's doing.
Oh, yeah, he's great in this film as well. Yeah. Like I said, I was surprised. 'Cause I think it speaks to his performance that in my memory of this film, he was in it more because he is such a big presence and he is so memorable. And it was only when I was like, God, this has been on for a while. I was like, where the hell's Friar Tuck? And then when he shows up, you suddenly look and like, this is a fair fucking whack into the film. But once he does show up, he starts immediately. He's very aware. All I can assume is that he's been watching the dailies of Alan Rickman and going, okay, I'm going to turn up my performance another couple of notches here to compete. Because he's the only one close to matching Rickman. Even he's not close to Rickman. And he's fucking turned it up to 11. I mean, like I said, I don't know how Rickman gets away with it. I don't know how Rickman's performance works in this film. I just don't understand it.
Michael McShane and fucking Morgan Freeman, I forgot his name then, together when Morgan Freeman is wrapped up in bandages playing a leper.
Oh, yeah.
And the guy's going, get this off the stage. He's going, come on, my leprous friend. Is this your finger? And the guy's going, leper? What do you mean leper? And he just walks away scared.
He pulls it off.
A nice little double act moment that I thought was really good.
Yeah, and he's great with everyone. Everyone he gets screen time with, he's just good. He always elevates the scene. So yeah, that's a great shout in fairness. And arguably maybe better than my choice. In terms of hates, this is a weird one because I'm going to pick Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio. But more specifically, I'm going to pick her hair because she is a beautiful woman, but her hair is distractingly curly. It's so goddamn curly. I just end up looking at her hair the whole time. But my real issue with her is that I always used to mix her up with the lady from The Abyss. Until I found out that she is the lady from The Abyss. Yeah. I was like, wait a minute, so who am I mixed up with? Turns out I'm mixing her up with Andie MacDowell. So yes, she isn't in Groundhog Day, but she is in The Abyss. And I just think for years on end, I just kind of conflated them both into the same person. Andie Mastrantonio, or maybe I should say Mary Elizabeth MacDowell. Jesus Christ, I made hard work of that. But anyway, it's more the fact that she confuses me that upsets me, despite the fact that she's very good in this film. Christian Slater never feels right in this movie, just not having him. And as I mentioned earlier, some of the geography. I think this movie looks great for the most part, but Kevin Costner taking an afternoon stroll from the White Cliffs of Dover to Nottingham via Hadrian's Wall is absolutely bananas. Of course, unless you're from the UK, it doesn't matter. This happens in a whole bunch of movies, but we are from the UK. We are aware of these landmarks. So yes, it's bonkers.
The weird time frame for me is number one. Like they managed to do all of this in the space of a week. It felt like.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. They managed to build it all. Secondly, nobody knew where they were in Sherwood Forest until they needed to know. Was one for me. Like,
didn't they find out because of Duncan? They followed Duncan, didn't they? That was the plan. Like when Duncan escaped. Yeah, because remember he was on the horse, and you had the guys in the shadows who were like, because he's blind and useless and whatever.
Yeah, but how did the blind man find him? How did the blind man manage to get there?
Well, he got there because remember he jumped on the horse, and I can't remember what the horse's name, something like Copernicus or something.
So he said, "Oh,
you'll have to be my eyes now." And the idea is the horse knows how to get to Sherwood Forest, so he just puts his head down, and the horse just walks there. So the horse basically walks him back home, as it were, to Sherwood Forest, and they follow him there, and that's how they know to attack.
All right, seems a bit convoluted. It's still in my hates.
Oh, it's 100% convoluted, but it is explained to an extent.
Yeah, and. I wanted to say Bull, but I might have to put Kevin Costner in it as Robin Hood. Like, I just...
That's fair enough. A lot of people feel the same.
No, it's not so much like because of the accent. I take or leave the accent. Like I said, I'm a big fan of the 1993 Three Musketeers. But none of them fucking trying to do a French accent or anything like that. So the accent doesn't bother me. It was the fact that, in all honesty, Kevin Costner brought nothing to Robin Hood. So,
well, I do disagree with that, but I did want to add one more hate. It's one line delivery that I can't stand, and it's I think it's Daniel Peacock as David Doncaster when during the attack that you mentioned, and he turns straight into the camera and shouts, "To the trees!" And there's something about that line delivery which always makes me clench my fist. I just hate it. It just feels over the top. The way he looks directly at the camera, like he's trying to annoy me. I just hate that line reading.
Thank you for saying about the camera thing, because you just reminded me the one thing I fucking hate is right at the end, and we haven't even mentioned Sean Connery was in this. Michael McShane, Friar Tuck, goes to the camera and says, "What are you waiting for? Go and celebrate." So it's hinting that he's actually talking to us, telling us to leave the
cinema and go have a baby.
Yeah, but in real life, he's just basically now in the face of these two while they're kissing. Like he's leaned forward and he's telling them to celebrate. So he's basically just gone in, "Are you kissing? Ooh, yeah. Are you like..."
Yeah, there's good drinking time. Get it over and done with. But yeah, it is strange that we forgot to mention Sean Connery, because that was a big deal in 1991. Like he wasn't credited, so people didn't know about it. And of course he shows up playing King Richard. I think there's like a weird, I don't know, historical inaccuracy as if there aren't millions in this film.
Oh, you mean the fact that Sean Connery was 61 in this and Richard was 30?
Yeah, Richard, but I think it was supposed to be 36 at the time, but who gives a fuck? But of course, it wasn't just the fact that it was Sean Connery. As I mentioned before, he had played Robin Hood, what would it have been, 14 years earlier in Robin and Marion. So he did have a history with the franchise, whatever you want to call it. But I can imagine in 1991, it's like he turns up at the end of the film, like, fucking hell, Sean Connery's in this film. How fucking cool is that? So you would never keep it secret nowadays, but it was cool in 91 for sure.
You got to think it's because he's a friend, he's a friend of Costner after The Untouchables and things like that. But he's also thinking, fuck me, I'm currently filming Highlander 2: The Quickening. I need a fucking break. Maybe I'll go and be King.
Maybe everybody would need a break from that film. Jesus wept. And another example of him playing a famous Englishman and just doing a Scottish accent again. It doesn't matter if he's Bond. It doesn't matter if he's King Richard. He's fucking Scottish. And just to be clear, I live in Edinburgh. Where he's from, nobody sounds like him. Nobody sounds like Sean Connery. It's bizarre. I've never met a single person, and I've lived up in Edinburgh for 15 years now. There's not a single person who sounds like him. And it's bizarre. I'm not sure if you'd get the same thing. But people up in Scotland can't differentiate between South Wales accents. So when they hear people on TV with like a similar accent to me, all they hear is me. I heard someone else say on the weekend they went to the Scotland Wales game, and they said some dude behind me was getting very upset about the rugby for obvious reasons because Wales got dicked by Scotland. And he said, "Dude, it just sounded like you." It's just like, you're like anyone who's from South Wales, we all just sound the same.
Supposedly. I was going to say, because it's quite funny. Whenever they interview somebody on TV, apparently from Cardiff, they all just sound like North Welsh as fuck. Like
they never sound like they're from South Wales. It's bizarre.
Everyone's got the Valleys accent, like the butt and everything. It's
just, Jesus Christ. I'm going to have to remember to ask. I'm not sure if there will be any, but were there any alternative titles for this movie?
Yes, there were.
Oh, there was! Fantastic. I asked for once and there actually were. It's not another Dick Tracy situation.
No, Dick Tracy, or what was last week's?
What the hell did we record last week? I mean, we recorded like 3 days ago. Oh, Back to the Future Part 2.
Back to the Future Part 2, yeah. I mean, memorable as fuck, apparently. So,
totally.
All of these keep Robin Hood, but they all kind of change the Prince of Thieves thing.
Yeah, well, you've got to have Robin Hood. That's what I thought. Like, surely they're not going to change Robin Hood to like Steve Jansen or something. Like, it's not going to happen.
Steve Jansen, right?
I don't know why Steve Jansen. I have no idea.
Austria have upgraded him.
Okay,
Robin Hood, the King of Thieves.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough.
Bulgaria changed his thieves title. Robin Hood, the Prince of Robbers.
Oh, that's rubbish.
Czechoslovakia decided, you know what? I like what Austria and Bulgaria are doing. I'll take both. Robin Hood, King of Robbers.
It just doesn't sound as good, robbers, does it? It just sounds like more like a petty thief rather than, you know, the Prince of Thieves. Oh, he's a robber, especially in an English accent. He's a robber. It's just horrible.
Czechoslovakia must not have liked that because they decided to actually have another one as well. Robin Hood, King of Outlaws.
It's okay. None of these I don't see. Again, it could be. We always have to take into consideration. It might be a translation thing, but none of these are improving on Prince of Thieves, which is already there. So don't get it.
Denmark, Robin Hood, the Outlaw.
That's okay.
Yeah, and Hungary have downgraded him from a prince. He's Robin Hood, Lord of Thieves.
Again, that actually makes more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Lord of Thieves, the last two we'll accept. Lord of Thieves in particular isn't too bad at all. I don't think it has the same ring to it, but narratively it actually makes more sense.
Yeah. There you go. So we have the titles. I'm not saying they were any good, but we had
But we had them. They existed. Do we? Well, I know, again, we say this every week, but this is a movie that will have tons of backs. So you're going to have to pick out 3 or 4 of the best.
Alan Rickman turned down the role of the sheriff twice before he was told he could more or less have carte blanche with his interpretation of the character. And boy, did he.
Yeah, and let's be clear, this film isn't the same without him at all.
Christian Slater ad-libbed Will Scarlett's line of "fuck me," he cleared it after.
Yeah, I forgot that he swore it. I didn't even notice it in the film. Yeah. And again, it would have been totally inaccurate. Like nobody's saying "fuck me" in 1197.
Well, there you go. Can I finish the...
Oh, sorry.
After Robin and Azima catapult over the castle wall, director Kevin Reynolds kept it in the movie because it was funny, despite the historical inaccuracy.
Well, there we go.
Right. As Robin...
I would have preferred if it come from like Little John. Fuck me, Fanny. You know, it's like one of those...
As Robin, Azim, and Duncan flee from Marion's, they pull up their horses before entering Sherwood Forest. Kevin Costner's horse half reared as he halted, and the horse's neck came up so fast that it smacked into and broke Costner's nose. According to DVD commentary, he did not miss a beat and continued with the scene.
Yeah, you can see it in the film. He actually turns his face slightly.
Yeah.
So he does, he does carry on with the scene. He tries to kind of cover his face slightly. It actually looks super innocuous when you see it in real time, but obviously gave him a whack.
So the name that Azim calls Robin Hood is Sadiq. It means Sadiq. Friend. It means friend in Arabic. It also means one who is trustworthy.
Ah, cool. So Christian and Sadiq.
Yeah. The initial trumpet flourish of the title score became Morgan Creek's theme music. Disney also used it for their logo during DVD previews.
Yes, I mean, that is the reason we're doing this podcast. Because, God, what film was it that we did where Morgan Creek... Stay tuned. And I was like... I was watching the film and the Morgan Creek thing comes up. I'm like, what is this theme tune? I was like, it's an absolute baller. And I was like, it sounds so memorable. And of course, it turned out to be Prince of Thieves. And yeah, we'll get to it in soundtrack and score. I'm getting ahead of myself. I do apologize.
I hate this one because it doesn't go into any elaboration. Ironically, Brian Blessed was almost killed filming his death scene. How?
That's all the information we're getting.
That's all the information.
I know. I'm like, do you pick 3 or 4 of like the best facts, and you pick the one that drives you up the wall. I hate this fact, so you're all going to hate it with me. That's it.
Oh, there you go. The shot of naked Robin swimming in the water was actually Kevin Costner's stunt double. The water was so cold, there was a big chance of Costner getting hypothermia, so they chucked in his stunt double instead.
Oh, was that the reason? See, I heard that he was going to charge him more for butt time. I don't know. Maybe that's just a rumor. I mean, it sounds more interesting, I suppose, rather than, the water was cold, but it is what it is.
And lastly, then, it was rumored that Kevin Costner and some of Alan Rickman's scenes cut when he realized that Rickman was upstaging him. Well, no shit, Sherlock.
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, though, I was glad they kind of edited it rather than him realizing while filming and turned up his performance, because as we've already mentioned, this film, it's already got Alan Rickman. It just about gets in Friar Tuck. If you have everyone else playing that, it just becomes a different film. But it does make for a tonally bizarre film at times. Because again, I know we mentioned at the top, there's a lot of references to potential sexual assault, and one very obvious sexual assault. And somehow they managed to play it for laughs, because the scene with Marion in particular, she's properly acting in that sequence. She's not playing it for laughs at all. She's like, oh, you can take my body, but you'll never have it. It isn't me, or something like that. And it's quite distressing. But because of that comes just after, like you said, the bit when he spreads a leg, which sounds horrendous when I'm saying it out loud, but it is genuinely the height of physical comedy when he hops up and spreads leg by kicking the legs apart. And I'm like, how are they getting away with this? But if you don't have Rickman in that scene, and it's somebody playing it much straighter, as I can imagine the original script would have suggested, this film is no way a PG. It's a much, much darker film.
Right, random question for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not saying, this is totally theoretical because it would never happen. If you were committing sexual assault in front of your mother, would you be able to get it up?
I mean, well, obviously fucking not. I don't think that's... I can say unequivocally, goddamn no. With just a priest watching somebody, reading your nuptials, I don't think it's going to work then either. And you got to remember as well, he's also under duress. Robin and Azim are there to kill him, and yet still he's like, I am going straight to the races. I don't know why he feels the need that he has to have sex there and then. Also, I know. What's the point?
Makes him think that even if he managed to dip his wick, he would impregnate her straight away.
Yeah, the whole thing is bizarre. Why does he have to do it then, just in case they kill him? I don't.
It's too late, Robin. I fucked her. She may or may not be pregnant. What?
Again, it doesn't make any sense. It's a very weird scene. In terms of the legacy of this film, I mean, it has to be the most successful Robin Hood movie this side of Errol Flynn. I mean, I think it almost certainly is from a box office perspective. I already mentioned the fact there was Robin and Marion in 1976 with Sean Connery and Audrey Hepburn. That was a big hit, and everyone loves Men in Tights. I think for a generation of people, me included, Costner is still Robin Hood. When I think of Robin Hood, I still think of Kevin Costner. I think specifically of this film. I don't think of Errol Flynn. I certainly don't think of Russell Crowe.
What about
I definitely do not think of fucking Taron Egerton. If someone says Robin Hood, I think most people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s think of Kevin Costner, and it's because this film was such a big hit and so much fun.
Randomly, I've seen 2018 Robin Hood more than I've seen this one.
Dude, that is unforgivable. I tried to watch that. Let's be clear. The 2010 version with Russell Crowe is the really gritty, the genuinely gritty version of this. It's fine. It's fine. Despite the accent, it's a well-made film. It's very forgettable, but it's fine. The 2018 Taron Egerton one, I watched 15 minutes of it, and I was like, that's fucking enough. It's so bad. It's so... Why have you seen that film not only once, but more than once?
Because I completely forgot that I watched it the first time.
Do you like that film? I honestly, I hated the 15 minutes I watched.
I know I've seen it twice. I couldn't tell you anything about it.
Well, that speaks volumes, I think. I would go as far to say there's very few films, once I start them, that I feel strongly enough about them to turn them off after 15, 20 minutes. The only other one I can think of in recent memory was Venom, the sequel, the Carnage one.
Yeah.
I watched 20 minutes of that and I was like, this is absolute horseshit.
I mean, the director of the Taron Egerton Robin Hood mind, he did go on to do The Return of the Goat 2, New World Order. So, I mean... Of
course he did. Well, that's what happens when you make the 2018 version of Robin Hood, which is legitimately appalling. So steer well clear of that. Or you could watch it twice as Rob did.
Still better than Gladiator.
Oh, don't be silly. Surely the most famous soundtrack accompanying song of all time. I mean, back in the late 80s through to the mid 90s, production companies used songs to sell and promote their movies all the time. That was just like a part of cinema. But few, if any, were as successful as Bryan Adams' Everything I Do for You. I mean, it was at number one for 16 weeks in the UK, which to this day is the longest ever run, despite the fact that it supposedly took 45 minutes to write, which is bonkers.
14 weeks in the US, I think, as well. So,
dude, it was just everywhere. In 91, it really was. As big as this film was, the song was bigger, 100%. It was just everywhere.
Absolutely.
We already mentioned the fact that it was the second biggest movie of 1991, just behind T2, but it's probably Costner's biggest movie, I assume, in terms of box office.
I was going to say, in terms of box office.
It's probably actually Man of Steel.
Yeah.
Because I think that made around 500-600 million, so it might be that. But he obviously isn't the star in that, although he is fantastic in Man of Steel. I was going to say, is this the movie that Costner will be remembered for? It's in his known section. You have the known for section on IMDb. So it's alongside Dances with Wolves, The Bodyguard, and I'll allow you to guess the fourth film in the collection of known for Kevin Costner. So you've got Dances with Wolves, The Bodyguard, this, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. What's the fourth one? Based on your earlier answer, you'll be very disappointed. It's the fucking Postman. What is the Post? Not the Untouchables, not even Waterworld, which is the much more famous of the flops. They've gone for the Postman. I don't know. That's very odd. As I said before, I mean, this is what Alan Rickman would have been known for if it wasn't for the fact that he was Hans Gruber. It's absolutely ridiculous. The fact that he's delivered two of the most memorable bad guy performances of all time. And I think outside of Darth Vader, I was like, these two would be on the Mount Rushmore, wouldn't they?
You'd have to think, wouldn't you?
I mean, Hans Gruber is on there 100%. I think
But I mean,
Sheriff of Nottingham, it's in the conversation for sure.
What's great as well is they're totally polar opposites. Like Hans Gruber is calm, collected. You can't push him. Whereas the drop of a hat, fucking Sheriff of Nottingham will apparently try to rape you on your wedding night. So
kills his cousin. He's like completely off the rails, and it's a really good point. I think it would be easy to be like, oh well, I'm known as this kind of bad guy from a movie he made 3 years earlier. To go from that to there, it is complete polar opposites.
Yeah,
absolutely. But equally successful.
He would definitely be in the top 5 conversation of cinematic villains.
I was going to ask as well, in terms of legacy, how highly does Sean Connery as King Richard rate on the cool cameo scale? So I've got a few here as I think the obvious ones. Bill Murray in Zombieland, David Bowie in Zoolander, although I was looking at one list, and this is as strange as The Postman being on the list of known for Kevin Costner. Somebody had Elton John in Kingsman, The Golden Circle, as one of the best. I was like, dude, that is an absolute stonewall, terrible cameo. Also, that's one of the worst cameos.
Doesn't that stop being a cameo when he's in it for about half an hour?
That was the worst thing about it, wasn't it? Like, don't get me... And we're not shitting on Taron Egerton movies, because I love The Kingsman, and he's fantastic in The Kingsman. Yeah. The Kingsman, The Golden Circle, is a terrible film. And one of the perfect examples is that cameo. Like, if he was in it, and he was in it for a scene and disappeared, you'd be like, oh, that was cool. It was Elton John. He's in it for the next 20 minutes. They run that joke into the fucking ground. I hated it. Anyway.
I mean, for me, it's got to be Channing Tatum in This Is the End, when he plays the gimp.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about it. I don't know if that beats Sean Connery as King Richard in this, but yeah, it's on the list. It definitely beats out Elton John.
What about Chuck Norris in Dodgeball? Fucking Chuck Norris.
That is quite good. Although, actually saying that, and I know everyone remembers the Bill Murray one, the coolest one really is David Bowie in Zoolander. It really he's so cool in that scene.
Never watched it.
You've never seen Zoolander?
No, can't do it.
What do you mean you can't do it?
Well, I watched Dodgeball for Vince Vaughn, but I fucking hate Ben Stiller.
Oh, really?
Yeah, not a fan.
Well, I love Zoolander. It's weird in terms of if you're going to revisit now, because it feels like a film of its time, and I feel like its legacy has been tarnished by its truly appalling sequel. But the first one is fantastic, and trust me on this: David Bowie's cameo is absolute gold, and he has
I think you're missing a fantastic cameo.
What's that?
Christopher Walken in Pulp Fiction.
Oh yeah, no, you are right. He took that gold piece, he stuck it up his ass. It's like
a couple piece of metal up my ass for 4 years.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, shit. Yeah, you might have won with that one. Yeah, I think I'll give you that one. Other than that, there was a famous Kenner toy line. I'm not sure if, like me, you had some of the toys, but I absolutely did. No. But basically, it was rushed to market, and they were all rip-offs. And I know that, toy lines in the 80s and 90s were kind of, rife with this. But, it's like a lot of them are made up of like DC figures. Like basically, Robin Hood is just the Green Arrow, but with a slightly different paint job and Kevin Costner's head. And I think, Will Scarlet is like Batman's legs and something else, and like Hawkman. No, that's Little John. I do apologize. But the most egregious, and the one I remember from when I was younger, is Friar Tuck, because he is just, I'm not sure if you remember the Gamorrean guards from Return of the Jedi, like the pig-looking motherfuckers. It's just one of those. And I remember it so clearly because I had like 3 versions of that figure. Like, everyone had loads of, well, certainly people our age, we all had secondhand Star Wars figures in like the late 80s. And I had like 3 Gamorrean guards, which were all exactly the same. And Friar Tuck was just the guard, but with Friar Tuck's head. He even had like the shoulder pads and like the armor and everything. It just didn't make any sense. So it was just a super lazy toy line. And it wasn't just the figures. I mentioned earlier the Ewok Village thing. It's actually in reference to this, because the Sherwood Forest playset was just the Ewok Village playset, just slightly rebranded. Same with the catapult, not a trebuchet, as you said. That was just one of the toys from Ewok Village again. So they just took a bunch of pre-existing toys and just hastily kind of turned them into Kevin Costner and Friar Tuck and whatnot.
To the point, I'm looking at the toy line now. You've got the Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves battle wagon.
Oh, yeah.
And right next to it, you've got the Star Wars Ewok battle wagon.
It's unbelievable. Like, I think the Kevin Costner figure even still had a G on his belt buckle because it was from the,
Yeah.
Yeah, which is just ridiculous. So it was just a holdover from the DC figure. So he still just had from Green Arrow. Sorry.
Oh my god! Oh, the fucking Will Scarlet one is awful.
Yeah. We'll put some of these up on Facebook because it is worth seeing some of these comparisons. They're absolute gold. And as I said, we know that there's like a long history of them taking existing figures and kind of, repurposing them for a new film. But I don't think I've ever seen it to this level. And even when I was younger, as I said, I noticed because I had the Friar Tuck figure for some bloody reason. Admittedly, I did have Robin Hood. I didn't realize he was a Green Lantern figure. But when you see the two side by side and the play sets alongside Ewok Village, it's absolutely unbelievable. So a bit of a money grab to say the least.
I never had these toys.
Yeah, I only had a couple of them. I didn't have the playset or anything. I had like 2 or 3 of the figures, but they're pretty shocking.
Yeah.
In terms of the score soundtrack, I mean, everyone knows the soundtrack specifically for Bryan Adams, Everything I Do for You, the fact that it was #1 forever. But the real star of the show for this movie, and we mentioned it earlier, is the main theme by Michael Kamen. And they know it's gold because they play it a million times. Michael Kamen, he's come up like a whole bunch of times on this podcast. He's one of those guys, like he's done like a whole bunch of super famous scores. What did he do? The Three Musketeers in '93. There we go. Another movie we'll be doing on this podcast that we've mentioned almost as much as Robin Hood. He did Highlander, X-Men, License to Kill. So he's done Bond. He did the Lethal Weapon series. He did the first 3 Die Hard films. He did Iron Giant. That was another podcast we did. So Michael Kamen's one of these guys. He keeps popping up on our podcast and he sits just below like the John Williams and stuff in this world. But I would argue that the main theme for this, which was used, as you said, for the Morgan Creek production company intro, and I think it was also used by Disney for their, remember the DVD adverts that used to be, funnily enough, on DVDs?
Yeah.
They used to use the music for those as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the main theme for this film, if nothing else, if you don't go back and watch this film, just listen to the main theme again. It's an absolute belter and so much better than Bryan Adams' Everything I Do for You. Sorry, it's actually, bizarrely, it's much more prominent in this film. The main theme is used throughout. Yeah. You only hear the Bryan Adams song a couple of times.
I was being a terrible co-host to you then.
You were looking at toys, weren't you?
You were going about the music and stuff, and I'm just looking at all these toys.
I don't blame you. As soon as I mentioned it, I was like, there's no way he's not going down the rabbit hole on these. I spent like a good hour looking at these toys.
I've fallen down the rabbit hole where they actually have pictures of all the scenes, not all the scenes, the figures, and they've shown you exactly what toys they've taken them from. And I've just seen the Friar Tuck one without the Friar Tuck cloak.
Yeah, that's when it's the real giveaway. He's even got like the fat legs of like the Gamorrean guard. It is just Gamorrean guard painted brown with a human head on. That's it.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
It really is. It really is fantastic.
So sorry, I'm back in the podcast.
That's quite all right. Just time for video games. So there was actually a pretty decent NES and Game Boy video game. I think there was a Super NES version as well, but it was developed by Sculptured Software and published by Virgin Media. For some odd reason, seeing the Virgin Media sticker on video games always makes me oddly nostalgic. There's just something about that line of video games. It just belongs in the 90s.
I always remember Cool Spot.
Yeah, there was just a whole bunch. And I remember just seeing the video games in Virgin Megastore when it used to be a thing in Cardiff and seeing those stickers in particular. It was just cool. It just reminds me of the 90s.
A few hours in that fucking video store.
Yeah, it was just something I don't think I've ever enjoyed browsing a store as much as I enjoyed browsing Virgin Megastore. I know like HMV has always been quite similar, but there was always something just cooler about Virgin. I'm not sure if it was the stock they kept and the fact that it really was a megastore, specifically the one in Cardiff. It was over like 2 floors and it was what was at the time like the big shopping centre at the start of town. Yeah. And honestly, it was like I would spend so much time just browsing stuff in there, even if I couldn't afford anything. It was just a cool shop. It was just a cool shop.
It's mad that entire store has now become 3 or 4 different stores.
Oh, it's a dump now. Yeah. It's a dump. It's died to death. But a bit depressing now, to be honest. In terms of a modern day take on the game, I was thinking like maybe a more light-hearted take on the 2013 Tomb Raider reboot. So like keep the bow and arrow, obviously, but replace the Japanese island with a forest and perhaps swap the hunting and all the death with some kind of robbery system that allows you to build up the power of Sherwood Forest while reducing the power of Sheriff and Nottingham Castle. And so you can get into like stronghold battles once you've done enough to reduce their power and build yours up. Of course, that was me just trying not to say, let's do, Red Dead Redemption 2, but with, Nottingham and Robin Hood.
Yeah.
Which would have been my other answer, but I'm going to stick with the Tomb Raider one.
I had 2. You either had Horizon Zero Dawn.
Yeah. Again, we're just naming games with bow and arrows, basically.
Yeah. Or if you wanted to go story and gameplay and just make it linear, Naughty Dog. Again, bow and arrow, because they did The Last of Us 2, or The Last of Us with bow and arrows and
So
stuff.
I think it would have to be open world, because I do like the idea of, again, like you've got like Sherwood Forest as the safe area, and you could like venture off into like, you know, more dangerous areas. You have to build up your level, usual shit, so you can go into other areas. And you have to rob and bring back money and, build up your rapport with the people and all that nonsense.
So basically, you've just said Assassin's Creed then.
It is a little bit Assassin's Creed. I mean, as I was saying that, I was like, this does sound a little bit Assassin's Creed. I'm sure some of the Assassin's Creed games have a bow. Oh, yeah. The one in Egypt certainly had a bow and arrow.
Yeah. And to the point where they all wear hoods.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, yeah, maybe should we just say Assassin's Creed then?
Yeah, just fucking reskin it. It's Assassin's Creed set.
And the thing is, you could literally have it be Assassin's Creed, because they could go into the Animus and then go like, oh, you could play off the idea that Robin Hood was a real dude,
and you just
so it's Assassin's Creed.
Robin Hood was an assassin, and he had to take a piece of Eden from the sheriff.
That makes perfect sense. Although I will say, Azim, killing the witch felt very God of War. There was something about the way when he threw the sword and had that reassuring thunk and it threw it across the room. I could almost imagine him pulling the sword back magically.
When he threw her against the wall, was she just made of feathers? She fucking flew.
She was, wasn't she? And then when she just her attack plan was just to run back into him, into his spear. She wasn't a very smart witch, in fairness.
No.
But anyway, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, this is going to be an interesting one, scoring and recommendation. So I'm going to make this easy. It's a super easy film to recommend because it's just a fun film. Even with its faults, it's long. Don't get me wrong. I was surprised going back to this film. I had it in my head that it was like an hour and 50 long. This film's like 2 hours and 22 minutes. It's a long-ass film. But it's still, despite the fact that it opens dark and some of the themes, as we mentioned, are relatively dark, it feels bright and breezy because of the performances. And above all that, I think it's quite fun, despite its myriads of faults. So I'm going to say recommend. And, this is one of those ones where I want to say 3.5, but it'll upset me. So I'm going to commit, and I'm going to say 4-star, despite its myriad of issues, because the performances are so fun, and I think the visuals have all held up really well. So yeah, 4 stars and easy recommend for me.
I wouldn't recommend it, and it's a 3.
You wouldn't recommend this?
No.
You don't think? It feels like one of those films that everybody likes. I just, even you don't seem fussed, and you've given it a 3.
Yeah, it's a 3. But just because it's
I see what you mean. I see what you mean.
Just because it's a 3 and I liked it, like it's a middle of the road. That doesn't mean I would go out to people and go, "Oh, you know what you should watch now? Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves." Like it doesn't feel like one I would carry a torch for or wave the banner for. So
see, I just think for the performances alone, I think it's worth it, and the fact that it's even patently ridiculous at times, I think that adds to that. But yeah, 4 stars and recommend for me. So yeah, that's been Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Next week for our 100th episode, you'd think, it's our 100th episode. Surely we'll go back to, we'll do an 80s classic we've both seen.
I mean, what if we always we've been trying to get, let's put it out there now. We've been saying a lot of times that we would do Robot Jocks, but we couldn't fucking find Robot Jocks.
Yeah, and plus the idea is like, are you and I the only 2 people on Earth who've seen Robot Jocks? So we've gone to the complete other end of the spectrum and chose a film which everyone has seen, except for Rob. We're going for 1997's Titanic, the most romantic of disaster movies. So yeah, a bit of an odd choice, but the fact is it is back in the cinema at the moment. It is ridiculous that Rob has seen it. So for some odd reason, we've decided episode 100 is going to be an education for Rob, and he's going to go away and watch the movie that every other person on the planet has seen like 3 times. Although I'll admit, I have not seen this film for 15, 20 years. It's been a long time.
It's a long old film as well, isn't it?
Oh, it's a long... I mean, if you thought this was long, I mean, Titanic's well over 3 hours. But it is very good. But then we are talking to a guy who thinks Gladiator is terrible. So who knows what Rob will think? Will it be another one of his famous curveballs? Saying that, I don't think it'd be as much of a curveball. If you came back next week and said you hated Titanic, it wouldn't be nearly as shocking as you saying you hated Gladiator.
I mean, the reason I've never watched it is because I know how it ends.
Yeah, I'll give you that. Yeah, there's
they hit a big ice cube and then it sinks. It's just so
that really would be a surprise, wouldn't it? If you got to the end and it just keeps sailing, just casually bypasses the iceberg. They just arrive in New York. It's a fanfare. Yeah, and Jack and Kate. No, Kate Winslet, that's a real name. Jack and... What's the name in it? Oh, why am I asking you?
What are you asking me for?
We'll find out next week. So yes, you can tell I haven't seen it for a long time because I can't remember her name. So yes, do join us bizarrely for episode 100 and Titanic for some fucking reason. But yeah, thank you for listening to Robin Hood. Join us next week for Titanic. And yeah, cheers for listening, guys. Bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now. Gladiator is shit.
Oh, and before we forget, here is Rob with all the finer details. Got to get through those, dude.
Yeah, so basically you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at HeyYouGuys80s. We're also on email at HeyYouGuys80s@gmail.com. Please feel free to drop us any recommendations, any corrections or omissions we may have missed from any of the films that we've covered. Just get them in. And also, if you could, please leave us some 5-star reviews. That would really help us. And we'd like to thank, as always, Darry Fletcher at Darry Doodles for the fantastic artwork that we're now producing. Thanks for that, mate.
Cheers, Darry.
Yeah. And thanks again for listening, and we will see you next week.
Cheers. Bye.
Hey, you guys!